Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Little Acts of Kindness. This will be Part 53, Chapter 53, entitled I Am an Idiot. Shota's lips turned downward as he glanced at the door again. Midoriya was late. Well, not late to class, but the kid always appeared early in the classroom. Yet today he didn't. He knew worrying wouldn't help the situation, and it was irrational, but still he couldn't help it. The late bell would be ringing in a minute, and he noticed that he wasn't the only one glancing at the door. Ida was as well, biting his lip a bit before he ended up grabbing his car-shaped shoe stem necklace and chewing on it. Then there was Tokiyami, who was sending Dark Shadow a puzzled expression. The quirk was flitting around, eyes constantly on the door. 30 seconds left. He also noticed that all the other students were also sending occasional looks at the door. Even Bakugo sent one, a scowl on his face. With 20 seconds remaining, the door opened and Midoriya came in. He was looking at the ground, and he didn't look up as he shuffled over to his desk. Aizawa opened his mouth to say something, just a quick, "I'm not mad at you, kiddo," or something, when Midoriya placed a couple items on his desk before practically fleeing to his seat. With a sharp breath, he looked down at the items. It was a gift card with a cat on it. Fuck, he fucked up badly. He had to explain to the kiddo that he wasn't mad. But it was time for classes to start. Shota almost wanted to say screw it, just so the kid knew he wasn't mad. But his duties as a teacher came first. Barely. He noticed that Dark Shadow was hovering around Midoriya and glaring at the rest of the class. With a deep breath, he started homeroom. Soon homeroom ended, and he went around the school, teaching history to kids who looked like they were sleeping through the lesson. He would have to make sure to lower their participation grade accordingly. He said nothing, though. Finally, classes came to an end, and he made his way back to his class, wanting to talk with Midoriya, wanting to explain to his student just how much of an idiot he had been yesterday. As he got closer and could see the familiar green curls, piercing yellow eyes glared at him. Tokiyami's quirk hovering nearby like a guardian. He ignored the quirk, ignoring the urge to erase them as he continued walking closer. Yet the closer he got, the more he noticed the other students. They were each looking at him with suspicion as they closed ranks behind Midoriya, who was walking towards the lunchroom signing with Tokiyami, seeming to be unaware of what his classmates were up to. Shota frowned behind his capture weapon, but decided pushing through the kids to get to Midoriya wouldn't help the situation, so he turned down another hallway, heading towards Hizashi's classroom. Entering into the classroom, he saw his husband grading papers. Hizashi glanced up. "So, how's the little listener?" Shota placed the gift card in front of his husband. "Not good. I really messed up." Hizashi sighed. "You two just need to talk. I'm sure Midoriya will understand once you can explain." "If his classmates will even give me a chance," Shota grumbled, crossing his arms. Hizashi laughed. "Your students giving you trouble?" They seemed to have formed a protection squad around him. His husband just smiled. "What, and you decided to back away instead of confronting them head-on? Where's my husband who charged into a horde of villains to protect his students?" Shota ducked his head into his capture weapon as he felt his cheeks heat up, even as he protested, "This is different." "Oh yes, very different. Now one of your kids feels like you're mad at him and you're being a coward," Hizashi retorted, a slight bite on his tone. Shota winced. He had fucked up. He knew he had. He had to fix it. He just didn't know how, not without making the situation worse. "Hizashi, please," he whispered softly. Hizashi sighed. "Gym Sigma after school today. I'll ask Midoriya to be there, and then you can explain yourself, and Midoriya can scream at you." Shota's lips quirked up as he replied. "Midoriya won't scream at me." "Well, okay. I will do it in his stead," Hizashi corrected with a laugh, green eyes sparkling. Shota smiled, knowing his husband could tell, despite it being hidden behind his capture weapon. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me, Sho. Just apologize to the kiddo." Shota nodded. They spent the rest of the lunch period chatting as Shota sipped on a jelly packet, and he decided to raid Nezu's snack fridge for a pile of them to give to the kiddo when he apologized. Meizo walked to the left of Midoriya, using his bigger height to help shield the boy from the other students. Something had upset the green-haired kid, and Meizo didn't know what, but it seemed like something to do with Aizawa-sensei. To the right of Midoriya, Tokiyami and Dark Shadow also stood. Tokiyami was signing with Midoriya, him and Ida being the only ones able to get the boy to respond, and Dark Shadow was standing guard similar to him. No one would harm the boy while they were around. He had failed once to be able to protect Midoriya, and he wouldn't fail again. The fact that Midoriya had been hurt during the sports festival, yet none of their classmates knew, or perhaps they, like him, knew and were just keeping quiet about it, not wanting to reopen their classmates' wounds. Currently, the class was walking to Gym Ada, which Aizawa-sensei explained was a gym ectoplasm had created to help train his clones to dodge hits so they would be more effective in battle. It was also useful for the students so they could learn to both avoid hits, and any hits they did take, to fight through the pain to continue to help people. They entered the gym, and the class paused as they saw a lone figure standing in the center. The most unusual feature on the boy was that his hands seemed to be giant clams, and he was moving his hands around quickly. Clangs and bangs signifying that projectiles were hitting the hands. Suddenly, there was a loud boom, and a giant black blur was speeding at the boy, who thrusted his hands forward, and clams grew bigger. Meizo watched as the shells cracked, and the black, now identifiable cannonball fell to the ground with a thud. A beep sounded, and the boy's clam hands disappeared, becoming normal hands. "Wow, that was so manly! You stopped a cannonball!" Kirishima exclaimed, heading to the front. The older boy seemed to punch in on himself, and Meizo heard him mumble, "It's not that amazing." He saw Kirishima frown. "Sorry, man, I didn't hear you." The other boy gave a shrug, shuffling a few steps. "Sorry to interrupt your class, Eraserhead." The boy spoke loud enough for everyone to hear before he continued to shuffle away. Aizawa-sensei sighed. "It's fine, Amajiki. But perhaps while you're here, you could give my students a demonstration. Perhaps give some advice on how to dodge better." "Why are all the teachers asking me to do stuff with others recently?" The older kid, Amajiki-senpai, mumbled to himself, quiet enough that Meizo had to strain to hear him. The lesson continued, and the students were shown how the gym worked. They were facing a wall where items would be shot out, and they were dodging to save themselves from pain. Meizo had so far seen multiple unique items: rocks, bullets, a soup can, a bottle of water, a bottle of nail polish, a pencil, and a plate, just to name a few. Meizo looked around the room, sorting out the information provided by his extra senses. When he first made an extra eye, he had almost thrown up from the extra vision. It was very disorienting, but he was more used to it now, so long as he didn't go above 3 extra eyes. It was with one of those extra eyes he noticed Amajiki-senpai pull Midoriya out of the way of a cannonball with a tentacle-looking arm. He also noticed a capture weapon that was being pulled back, having been only a moment behind to pull Midoriya out of the way. With too many sensory outputs, he couldn't focus on what Amajiki-senpai was saying to Midoriya, but he did see them having a small signed conversation. Soon Midoriya was back into the fray and seemed to be doing a bit better at dodging the objects coming at him. His expression was more focused instead of the distracted one he'd had all day. After what seemed like forever, a beep rang from the gym, and the objects stopped coming out of the walls. Meizo noticed that Mineta was the first to collapse on the floor, but several other students weren't far behind, such as Hakakure, if the hovering clothes on the floor were an indication. Meizo went over to Aizawa-sensei, who was pulling out water bottles from a backpack, and grabbed nearly half of them and headed over and started handing them out, his classmates giving worn-out-sounding thanks. Once his classmates had the water, he drank one himself, sitting and leaning against one of the walls. Eyes roaming over, he noticed Midoriya was off to the side, signing with Amajiki-senpai. After a few minutes, Aizawa-sensei called for them to return to the changing rooms. Izuku chewed on his necklace as he made his way over to Gym Sigma. Yamada had asked him to come by so they could continue training voice quirk. He felt he was doing okay with it, and his classmates were being really nice about not sneaking up on him. Not that they did before, much, only on accident the first few days of school because they realized just how badly he freaked when someone snuck up on him. Gnawing mildly on the necklace, his thoughts drifted to Aizawa-sensei. The teacher was mad at him. Izuku just knew it. Why else would he be silent? Aizawa-sensei had said he wasn't mad when he was in the room with All Might, but he was so silent and distant. Sometimes Aizawa-sensei had been silent, but the man was still expressive in a way. Like, despite the man's resting bitch face, as Tensei-san called it, he was still conveying emotions. But yesterday, in the car ride, Aizawa-sensei's expression had been closed off. Izuku let the Chu necklace drop down to hang around his neck as he pushed the door open to Gym Sigma and entered into a familiar room. Immediately he saw Yamada standing in the center, his bright hair gelled up into his signature style, though his glasses were perched on top of his head, black leather jacket discarded. He was already a few steps into the gym when he realized Yamada-sensei wasn't alone in the gym. It was too late to back out now. He was spotted as the two teachers turned towards him, in near-perfect sync. A testament to how long they'd probably known each other, though it was admittedly more than a little intimidating. He swallowed as he continued forward, each step feeling like lead. Had Aizawa-sensei said something? Another step. Was Yamada-sensei going to be mad at him too? Another step. He had no real evidence to support either of them being upset or even angry, but his anxious thoughts wouldn't drop the idea. Just the way Aizawa had looked, Izuku didn't want his teacher to be upset with him. They were the first adults to actually seem nice. Izuku didn't want to mess it up. Not like he messed everything up. With the last few steps, he was within hitting range of his teachers, though he kept his gaze turned down, submissive. No doubt he was about to get scolded for yesterday. "Hey, a little listener." Yamada-sensei greeted, his voice his signature cheerful, though there was the slightest edge of something to it. Something Izuku couldn't quite place outside of it not being anger. Subconsciously or not, he was aware that he edged just a little closer to the blonde than he did his homeroom teacher after that. Strange, considering not too long ago he was trying to avoid him entirely. Midoriya. Izuku couldn't stop the flinch. The elbow Aizawa-sensei received to his side went by almost entirely unnoticed by him. Just hearing his name from a teacher he knew was mad at him brought back memories of previous teachers punishing him, berating him, forcing him to... Izuku swallowed, glad that Yamada's voice cut off his train of thoughts. "It's all right, Izuku. Shota just wants to apologize. Can he do that?" Yamada asked, voice gentle and soft. Izuku's brow furrowed a little, lifting his head up enough to look at the blonde in a confused way. Questions whirling through his mind. Why did he ask his permission? Wouldn't Aizawa-sensei just apologize anyway, regardless of what he wanted? If he wanted to apologize, wouldn't he just say those meaningless words? Yellow, flecked green eyes met gentle, spiraled olive green eyes that were filled with something Izuku couldn't remember seeing before, or at least, not in a long time. For a second, he remembered his mom's voice, singing a song as he played with some toys, light and warm and happy. As if he could be read like a book, he got an answer to the unspoken question. "If you don't want to hear it yet, that's okay. It might hurt his pride a bit, but I'm sure he could handle it." If Izuku smiled just the tiniest bit, no one else had to be aware of it. Now that he got over his fear of the English teacher, Izuku found the man always seemed to make him smile, to bring him out of any spiraling thoughts he had. He trusted these two teachers, and he desperately wanted them not to be mad at him, so he nodded, just a tiny movement, but he felt too tired to make a bigger movement. "Okay," he signed, hands shaking a bit. Swallowing, he took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves and his racing thoughts as he glanced up through his fringe at the teacher. He met Aizawa's eyes for a brief moment before he looked away again, afraid to see whatever emotion was in his teacher's gaze. "Midoriya," the teacher started, gruff voice soft, but yet Izuku still tensed up, shutting his eyes for a moment. "Izuku, kiddo, I'm not mad." There was a pause, almost like the teacher was looking for the right words. "At least, not at you. You didn't do anything wrong, all right? There's times where I'll get angry, and to avoid lashing out at the people close to me, I keep silent. I'm sorry if that silence made you believe that you did something wrong. I wasn't, and am still not, mad at you. I promise." Izuku glanced up away from the floor, and saw through blurry eyes that Aizawa-sensei was crouched in front of him, eye level with him. Unlike yesterday, where Izuku couldn't make out anything, now his stoic expression seemed open again. The tone of his voice, the slight desperation and sincerity, the just barely noticeable way his expression shifted to reflect that he was being completely genuine. Aizawa truly wasn't mad at him. With that, the dam burst, and Izuku threw himself at the teacher, hugging and crying, and he was so happy that the teacher wasn't mad at him. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 53 of Little Acts of Kindness. Chapter 54 will be up next. I hope you all are still enjoying this one, and as always, thank you so much for listening.